Good afternoon, everyone. It's good afternoon in Sri Lanka and different time zones for the different panelists. It's good morning for, I think, Namita and Chatushan, and good evening for Lakshita, and good afternoon for Samindu and Buddhima, if I'm not mistaken. Right, so it's a pleasure to have all of you, and I'm glad to have the 5 panelists, especially for joining with us from different parts of the world. So we'll get started with the introduction, and each panelist will go through their own experience first, and then I'll be asking them some questions, and then finally we'll open the floor for audience Q&A. So I'll get started with the first panelist, Lakshita Chaturanga. So all these panelists, as you might have seen, they are alumni of ENTC. So some of them might not need an introduction, but I'll do that anyway. So Lakshita obtained his PhD in Electrical and Computer Systems Engineering from the Monash University in Australia, and his bachelor's degree from ENTC at University of Moratuwa. During his time at ENTC, he was a nominee for the LSS Award at the E-Forum. He also worked as the president of E-Club and worked as a lecturer for a couple of years after his graduation. Currently, he is working as a data scientist at Bunnings Group in Australia. His passion is blending computational thinking with inferential thinking to solve problems in science, technology, business, and community. His research interests lie in the area of quantum optics and data science. So Lakshita, over to you to walk us through the experience that you had when you were applying for graduate studies.
Thanks, Subodha, for that generous introduction, and also thanks for organizing this and inviting us to share our experience with the current undergrads of ENTC, and it's really good to be back talking to some familiar faces. I'll quickly share my screen. I just have a single slide so that I can think it host disabled participant screen sharing. Is it possible to?
You should be able to share the screen.
Should I? Okay. All good. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so just a single slide so that I can walk you through the general process of applying for an Australian graduate school. So this is the same thing that I also followed. I mean, I can't say exactly this is the same for every situation, but generally this is how it goes. So the key thing to understand is you are applying. So before you apply, you need to get the support of a supervisor for your application. Unlike, for example, some places like USA where you can go in without knowing who your supervisor is. In this case, for most Australian graduate schools, you need to know your supervisor and get their support before you apply. So the first thing that I did was finding a set of potential supervisors. The sources may be, for example, Google Scholar profiles, university websites. The research groups have their own websites. You can talk to different people, and even the papers that you read from them, you can get some links for potential supervisors. So there may be multiple sources, but at the end of the day, you need to come up with a set of potential supervisors. And then the second part is I think the most important part, where you're contacting these supervisors through personalized emails. Pay close attention to the word personalized, because I also had to sort of look at their profiles and their recent research interests and adjust the way I write to those people. Maybe it needs some more time in reading some of their recent work and then adjusting the way I write these emails, which is really important, because I've seen some people just send the same email to many different people, and I would not recommend doing that. You need to sort of customize the way you write your emails. And then some of them will respond to you. Of course, the same thing happened to you. Like you don't get responses from everyone that you write for different, a plethora of reasons. Some of them might not have funds these days. Some of them may be casually, away from work these days. So you need to have a bit of luck as well. when it comes to supervisors responding, which is quite natural. So once they start responding, then you need to establish a connection, and then some of them might invite you for some video conferencing sessions. But for me, it was all the communications were done through email. And then the final objective of doing all this is getting something called the invitation email, or the official consent, where they say that your invitation will be supported by them, or basically they say they invite you to apply. So that may be in the form of an email or some document, and that invitation or the official consent should be used or uploaded for your official application, to prove that you have contacted a potential supervisor and this person is ready to support your application. So that's the most important thing when it comes to applying for Australian graduate schools in general. And then after that, once you come to this point, most of the hard work is now done. And then the official process starts, where you need to first write a research proposal. Your supervisor will most of the time guide you in writing that as well. The key thing to understand here is that this research proposal is just an official thing where you need to showcase your scientific communication skills, as well as the basic understanding that you have for the particular domain of research that you're applying or that you're going to do. And the project that you propose or the research gaps you identify may or may not be the actual things that you do when you actually start your study. So it's just for official purposes, as well as for some people to evaluate your communication as well as your basic understanding. That's the key idea. And after that, you start the official application process. You need to get some recommendations, minimum 2. Yeah, I think I got maybe 3 recommendations just in case from 3 of the esteemed lecturers of our department. And then simply uploading the official documents. You need to have, as I said earlier, the invitation email that you get from your potential supervisor, the research proposal to go along with other official stuff like the degree certificates, transcripts, your certifications for your English examination. It can be IELTS, TOEFL, PTE, GRE, or whatever. For that, you need to go through the university website to understand what are the allowed examinations that you can go through. And then if available, some publications would also be nice to get attached. And then other certifications and documents where I claimed, for example, if I claim that I have a particular work experience, then you might need to upload something to prove that you worked there. So basically, whatever you claim in your email, your application, you need to provide some proof for that. So that's basically the process. And then finally, you need to then it's all not in your hands. So you need to hope for the best. Yeah, that's in a nutshell the process that I went through, as well as if you're planning to apply for some Australian schools, then here's the process in general. Yeah, over to you, Subodh.
Thank you for that, Lakshita. Next in the list of panelists, we have Buddhima Gamlat. Right. So Buddhima graduated from University of Moratuwa from ENTC in 2015, and he stayed at ENTC for 1 year as an instructor and as a lecturer. He joined EPFL in September 2016 as a researcher. Buddhima has been passionate about mathematics and algorithms for a long time, which led him to pursue a PhD in theoretical computer science. His research focuses on approximation algorithms for clustering and graph matching in different computational settings. Buddhima, over to you to give us some details about their studies in EPFL and Europe in general.
Yeah, thanks, Subodh, for the introduction. So regarding the application procedure that I followed to get accepted in EPFL, so here, so unlike the Australian model, I think here we have general application procedure. That means you don't apply for a specific professor. You are just following like the school's application procedure. And in EPFL, there are 16 different PhD programs. And for the technical fields, I can recommend 4. They are basically engineering, EDMI for microengineering, EDRS for robotics and control systems, and EDIC for communication and computer science. So what I applied to is the EDIC program, and more specific details about EDIC. So there are 2 ways you can do a PhD in EDIC. But the application procedure is common. So there's a general application portal. You have to submit your usual application with your CV, 3 recommendation letters, and your statement of purpose. But most importantly, you don't have to submit your GRE scores, or you don't need any language tests if your first degree is in English, which is the case for the University of Moratuwa. So this is the main application portal, and then the selection committee will accept students into 2 groups. So the first one is the fellowship students, which means that for the first year, which means you can always join EPFL, but for the first year, you have the freedom to work with different people and figure out which direction you want to go. So this is the best case scenario. If you are accepted as a fellowship student, you have guaranteed funding for 1 year from EPFL. And within this year, you get the chance to do 2 projects with 2 professors, or even with a single professor, and then choose one of these professors as your supervisor, if he likes to hire you. Then if you find a lab in these 2 years, which is the case, like almost all people find a lab, then for 3 more years, you get guaranteed funding. So the usual duration for a PhD is 4 years, and within 4 years, your PhD is done. But people take, like, you can take up to 5 or 6 years as well if you have funding. I mean, if the lab has funding, you don't have to look for any funding. Your professor will take care of that. The other scenario is that you are accepted as a doctoral student, but not as a fellowship student. In this scenario, you have to contact different professors and ask them whether they are willing to hire you. So you have 1 year to do this, but in this 1 year, like, you are not at EPFL, so you can't come here, but you can talk to professors, and if they are willing to hire you, you can directly join their lab. And again, you get guaranteed funding for 4 years. But this scenario is like it's difficult to find a professor this way, because unless you have done an internship or something with that professor before. So these are the 2 ways to join EDIC. For the other programs, I don't, according to my knowledge, there is no fellowship program. So there are direct hires only. But again, you have to apply for the common application portal, and then the committee will select some candidates and get them accepted. But then again, you have to contact the professors and find if they are willing to hire you. So this is the procedure at EPFL. But in other universities, this might be different. For example, in ETH Zurich, this procedure is somewhat different. I think Savindu can explain that better. So yes, so this is the procedure I went through.
Thank you, Buddhist. We'll have some more questions to you as we progress through the session.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Jatushan, the next panelist. Jatushan, thank you for joining us early in the morning. I know it's very early in California. So Jatushan Rajasegaran is our next panelist. He's currently pursuing his PhD at University of California at Berkeley. Previously, he worked at the Inception Institute of Artificial Intelligence as a research associate. He completed his bachelor's from University of Moratuwa from ENTC in Sri Lanka. His research interests lie in computer vision and deep learning. So Jatushan, over to you to take us through the process that you went through.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Charles, and thanks everyone for organizing this one. And it's really good to back to at least in the ENTC one room virtually. Yeah, so I think the model is pretty much for the US. I actually apply to US and Canada. So here the model is pretty much similar to the European model, where you will be applying to these universities in a general application form. You don't necessarily have to contact your professors like in Australian model, but the application process is pretty much similar, that you just need to, like, first you need to have your at my time, what you need to do is you have to have this GRE and TOEFL exams, and a quite decent score is important there. And for example, like 320 plus for GRE and like 110 for TOEFL. And then the second most important thing is that you need to write your statement of purpose. I think that is like the really important thing, because that's kind of going to tell, because not in the screening process, I talked to some of these people who do this screening. They said like about 500 people apply, they just take 20 people just by looking at this statement of purpose. So it's what going to tell what you are, and because they are not going to interview everyone of you, so you should really write the statement of purpose very carefully, and it has to tell what it has to be, like very in your own words. So and of course there has to be like at least 2 or 3 recommendation letters. So I think these are the 3 main important components when you start applying. But fortunately actually for me it's unfortunate that GRE is it's not really it's a bad thing actually. So it's bad. So but fortunately you guys, I think most of the school in US has now stopped asking for GRE because of the COVID, plus there are some cultural bias in this GRE exam. So GRE is actually most probably gone these days. So that's a good thing. So once you have these 3 parts, I think maybe you need still TOEFL, I guess, but that's pretty easy. If you have these 3 things, you just need to go to the university portal and just apply. The application process is pretty straightforward, that you just need to fill like some Google Forms or something. Yeah, but during this application, you might want to like list at least like 1 or 2 professors you wants to work in the university or the lab. So just like you could just go through the university website and find some of the professors you might feel interesting working with them, or else it's not necessary because it's just a general application. But it's good to have some sort of knowledge that what kind of professors you want to work with. So it's good to mention their names in the statement of purpose and the university application. And after the application, once you make the application, it may be good that you can write an email to each of these professors personally. Most probably in the general case, they may not going to reply. And but if some of them reply, it's good that you're able to like talk to them, and they can just look at your application personally and decide whether they're going to take you in. So it's not a bad idea to write these emails. I think that's like the straightforward way. There is nothing much complicated here. And the funding is, you don't have to worry about the funding, because almost all the PhD programs are fully funded. And again, as in like at least in Berkeley, like we had this similar idea of this fellowship thing, that for the first year you don't have to, you will be fully funded, and you don't have to choose, like you are not predefined to a professor. So you have the freedom to work with anyone you in the lab, and then after 1 year only you had to declare your professor, personal advisor. So I think that's also a really good thing, that you will have some freedom to explore what are the things you want to do during the PhD. Yeah, I think that's all, I guess.
Thank you, Jatosha. Thank you for that. We'll follow up with some more questions. Right, next we have Namita, our next panelist. Right, so Namita Lienege is a PhD student at Yale. He's working in the Yale Efficient Computing Lab. His current research is on building scalable multi-FPGA systems for quantum error correction. He received his BSc from ENTC, University of Moratuwa, and his master's from the Rice University in USA. Namita, over to you.
Hi, Subodha. Thank you very much for organizing this. And I'd say it's good to be back home. So
Pleasure to have you.
I'd say good afternoon, everyone. And so I'll go through the process I went through about 4 years or 5 years ago. So the first thing you do is you look at all the research groups in different universities to see what fits you best or what fits your interest. I would like to stress on this point more because whatever the group you pick or whatever the group selected would be the place where you're going to spend next 4 or 5 years or more years of your life. And it basically define your career. So I'd stress this and look for all the research groups and figure out what suits you best. And in this process, you have to look at like how are these groups handled, how are the advisors doing, or how's the student advisor relationship. So you can always write to the students and ask, hey, I'm interested in your group. Can you give me some pointers, or should I join? And after you figure out like a couple of groups, and then you have to look at the universities of those groups, and the universities have quite different requirements from university to university. And some universities ask for GRE and TOEFL, and some universities waive GRE, some universities waive TOEFL because our degree is in English. So, and they have various different requirements to the statement of purpose and the number of letter of recommendations. So after you figure out this, it's best to have a set of deadlines like, okay, at this day, I'm going to get the TOEFL and GRE done. At this day, I'm going to finish my statement of purpose and maybe the diversity statement. And then the next process happens is you meet with 3 people who can write a letter of recommendation. So, and you have to always understand that at this period, there's going to be a lot of requests for letters of recommendation for the lecturers at ENTC. So you have to be early as possible, and you have to sometimes keep reminding them because they have other things to do than writing your letter of recommendation. So after you figure out that, then most universities have the application deadline in December, but it varies from university to university. So always check and make sure you have everything by this date. And one hard thing is some universities ask the transcript before the deadline. So in those universities, you have to make sure that you apply for the transcript from University of Moratuwa a few months, at least a month before that deadline. So that transcript would be mailed to that university by that day. And after you apply, I guess the hard part is done. But so generally all US universities admit them as a pool of students without for a specific group. But in the admission committee, one professor or many professors should say we should pick them. So it's always good to write to the professor saying your interest. You may not get a response, but they may remember you. If you are lucky, you may get a response. So, and afterwards you may be admitted in multiple categories. If you are admitted as a fellow, you have like 1 year to pick a research group with full funding. So you can look into all the group. You may be admitted directly as a research assistant for a particular group, or you may admit it as a teaching fellow where you teach for the first year and at the same time you figure out a group. And it highly depends from university to university. So, and in my university, I know every first year student is accepted as a fellow for the first 2 years. And so that's all I have got to say, and feel free to contact me or any of us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Next, we have Samindu. Right. So, Samindu, we have Samindu Herath. Samindu graduated from Ananda College, Colombo, and University of Moratuwa as the most outstanding student. He's a biomedical engineering graduate with research interests in assistive technologies and diabetes-related food complications. During his time at University of Moratuwa, he was the Sports Council President, the hockey captain, and the most outstanding hockey player for University of Moratuwa in the period of 2017 and 2018. Samindu got his master's degree from ETH Zurich and is currently reading for his PhD in data-driven decision-making to improve firm performance. Samindu, over to you to take us through ETH Zurich's process and the process in Europe in general.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. So first and foremost, it is indeed a great honor for me for being privileged to be present in front of this august audience today. And it's my pleasure to be back at ENTC, even though in the virtual format, where we spent nearly 4 years filled with unforgettable memories. So I will quickly carry you through my personal experience I went through when applying to ETH Zurich, and I will try my best to keep it a little bit more general, so you can also try to apply in whatever the case you are in few months' time. So I applied only to ETH Zurich and EPFL, both Swiss universities, and already Buddhima carried you through the process at EPFL, and ETH more or less follows the same process. In my short explanation, I will give you a slightly different perspective of how to apply and get through to the graduate school. So first step, I will outline basically 7 steps you should go through when applying for a graduate school and securing your position. So the most important step and the first step is you should discover your strengths, weaknesses, and your passion and what drives you. Because when you are going for higher studies, you are basically narrowing down your specialization, because you obtain your bachelor's degree in electronics and telecommunication engineering or biomedical engineering from University of Moratuwa. But then in your higher studies, you narrow down your specialization and you focus only one specific field. So if that field is not your passion or not your interest, you are going to not enjoy it, and then you are most probably going to suffer it. So first and the most important thing is finding your passion and playing your strengths. I can also take an example. Suppose if Usain Bolt, the famous athlete, if he was trying swimming, he might not have been so successful. The same applies to Albert Einstein. If he was trying 100 meters sprinting, he might not have also been successful. So first and foremost, you should find your strengths, and then you should, as the second step, you should explore the opportunities along your strengths or along your interests. And that's how I ended up in ETH Zurich, and I shifted mainly from biomedical engineering to data science, and also I am doing a lot of work with management strategy and improving firm performances. So it's basically going towards business. So you should first identify your strengths and weaknesses, and that helps you quite a lot in securing your position. And then once you have found out your strengths and weaknesses, your passion and everything, and where the best opportunities lie, then you can start searching for the universities and then shortlist them. For example, you can use Google basic Google search or Times Higher Education rankings, QS rankings, and also some referrals from the department lecturers, for example, to shortlist the universities and the programs which you are interested in and where the best opportunities lie. And then you can check for the requirements they are asking, because they might be asking for you for a master's degree. For example, the difference between ETH Zurich and EPFL, for example, ETH Zurich specifically asks for a master's degree, and without a master's degree, they will not recruit you or admit you as a doctoral student. And there will be test scores, for example, IELTS, TOEFL, GRE, and these factors were already discussed by other panelists, so I will not take much time. And then after you match your requirements for the degree, you basically submit your application with recommendation letters, online application, usually at ETH Zurich. And then happens the screening process. I will also guide you through quickly the screening process. Basically, they look for your GPA, your publications, your courses, and the test scores, and these should be matching with the program you are applying to. And then they will have interviews, because at ETH Zurich, we had face-to-face interviews. Because of Corona, we had online interviews. But in the interviews, they basically ask you questions about your personality, interpersonal skills, and questions about the professor's research group and what research they have done. So you should also kind of read their papers and look what they are doing in their group. And also they will specifically ask you about your final year project or your master's thesis. So this is pretty much important, and you should be able to answer their questions properly in the interview. And then if everything works fine, you get the offer letter and you are very happy. And then, but you should not relax even if you get the offer letter, because there's a lot of administration and immigration workflow to follow. But there are a lot of students who get admitted to very good universities, but they fail the immigration process. It is very unfortunate situation, but the best way you can follow is basically take the help of the university, because they have specialized officers who are helping students to process the visa. For example, ETH Zurich has a specific officer who handles all the visa activities and also the induction. So you should get in touch with these officers of the university and then process your visa immigration application methodically and comprehensively without any loopholes. So this is pretty important. And this is basically the process which I went through when applying to higher studies, as well as securing a place at ETH Zurich. And I will also quickly share my screen, which outline the basic steps which I discussed right now, which will be helpful if you are taking down any notes also. So hope you see my screen. First, you should understand your strengths, passion, then you should look for the best opportunities and then match their criteria, and you should prove why you are the best candidate. You can use your GPA, test scores, publication, extracurricular activities, and everything to prove you are the best candidate. And then you proceed with the admin and immigration workflow. So that's it from my side.
Right. So we'll have some specific questions coming your way, everyone's way actually, not just Samindhu's. So let's move on. I have some questions for each and every one of you now, based on what you said. So I'll get started from Lakshita. So these are our 5 panelists. I hope you're familiar with them by now. We'll go through those questions now, again in the same order. Lakshita, the first question goes to you. It's specific about the experience that you went through. So in terms of scholarships, so this is not actually one question, but it's more like a combination of questions. It's about scholarships. So how easy is getting a scholarship for graduate schools? What are the things that needs to be prepared beforehand to get a very good scholarship? And also, I think this is one of the pressing questions. Will those scholarships be enough to afford a quality life during your PhD? What's your opinion?
Yep. So I think I'll start from the most pressing question and then answer the other two. So as far as the scholarships are concerned, I'll try and give some numbers as well as of now, and maybe try and compare it with some others and then see what can you do and what you cannot do and all that. So there are 3 components to the scholarship, namely the tuition fee waiver scholarship, the health cover, and then thirdly, the most important thing, which is the stipend that you get to your hand. So it's basically the thing we get to bear our expenses. So most people get this stipend and the tuition fee waiver, but some very rarely do not get the health cover. In that case, you might need to pay for it, pay some amount, and then get it, because it's needed, especially during, I think, your visa process needs that you have some sort of a health cover. But that's some minor detail. But all in all, the fact that you get your scholarship means you're well off. You don't need to pay your tuition fee, and then you get some dollars to your hand for your expenses. And I will give some numbers. So the current standard stipend that you get paid in Australia for these scholarships would be around 29,000 Australian dollars, and that is tax-free. So, and that amounts to around 2,300 Australian dollars per month. And if you're living as a single person, this amount is more than enough for you to live comfortably. And this is basically, so the most important thing to understand is this is basically to be a student and do whatever you are supposed to do, not to work as a teaching assistant or a research assistant. Just being a student, you get a stipend. This amount is paid, and that means on top of that, you're allowed to do some hours of teaching assistant duties or research assistant duties and then get paid for them as well. Which and that amount of course varies on the type of work you do and the number of hours you work, but as a baseline you can think of 2,300 Australian dollars as the minimum value that you gonna get per month to your hand for your expenses. And on the other hand, some supervisors and research labs might offer you some top-up scholarships as well. I think you can, even after you come to your PhD, you can apply for them, but most of the time you get offered those top-up scholarships as well by your supervisor or the research lab at the time of applying, or when you're in your initial talks with your supervisor, they say that you can apply for this thing as well. So as I'll give some example. I've met some people who have received around 10,000 Australian dollars per annum on top of their normal scholarship, which means around you get paid around 40,000 Australian dollars tax-free annually to do your PhD. And on top of that, you can do all these other stuff as well, like teaching assistant duties and all that, which is the best case scenario. But the number you should be mostly thinking of is 29,000 Australian dollars plus some tutoring. So as I said, it's a really good amount if you are living on your own. But on the other hand, if you're married and if your other half is also living with you, you can still manage, of course. But of course, like obviously the financial freedom is a bit less, but still you can manage. But to cover up for that, you can do some tutoring, and then of course, if your partner gets a job, that would be a real bonus. But as a whole, you can manage. So that's about the financials. But if needed, I can talk about it in detail or give some other details as well later. And coming back to the original other two questions, how hard or easy is it to get hold of a scholarship? I think that was the first part of the question. The degree of difficulty is of course subjective, but it mainly depends on a few factors. Obviously, your academic performance speaks for itself. So yeah, it's the main thing, and also the school you're applying to, and whether your supervisor that you're getting your support, whether he's willing to take students and how many students he is willing to take. Those things also matter, and also. In general, the way you communicate and present yourself and tell your story, that's, I think, the main thing, apart from your academic performance. Those are the key things that govern how difficult or how easy it is to secure a good scholarship. But in general, most Australian grad schools, because they offer direct PhDs, which do not even require master's degrees, the process, I think the competition is a bit tough comparatively. That's my understanding. Maybe things are a bit different now, but when I came here, that was the case. And the things you need to have in hand, I think that was the other part of the question. So as I said earlier, the hardest part is finding a supervisor and getting them to agree to supervise you. So while there have been exceptions, of course, most of the time, if you get through this process and try and convince a supervisor to sponsor you or like support your application, then most likely you will definitely get a scholarship. I mean, that's not guaranteed, but the odds are high. So the main things they look for is, of course, your GPA, which speaks for itself, and whether you have publications and your level of English. The qualifications such as your work experience, your extracurricular activities may also matter in some cases where the competition is too tight. But the key things are, of course, again, GPA, publications, and English. And when it comes to publications, there's no mandatory requirement saying you need to have publications, but it would be useful. And of course, the venue of the publication matters, but you do not need to publish in top rank conferences or Q1 high impact factor journals. It would be nice if you have them, but publishing in some recognized venue is sufficient at this stage as of to secure a PhD scholarship. So that's the key thing, because getting at least 1 or 2 publications would be really beneficial in securing a position. And you don't need to be like, if you are doing machine learning, you don't need to have an ICML paper to secure a PhD opportunity, right? So that's the key idea. So and also, by the time you write to your supervisor, I think it's always good to have your IELTS ready, IELTS course ready, because after the process, if they ask for it, then you can't just say I will do it and then submit, because some supervisors might lose interest in you if you say that, right? So you don't need to take any risks. By the time you contact these supervisors, it's always good to have IELTS ready. And most universities have a minimum requirement, for example, 6.5 or something. But my advice would be, try and score as much as possible. If your supervisor sees that you have, say, an 8 each or 8.5 something instead of a 6.5, they would be really interested in hiring you, because think from their perspective, they are hiring someone who they have never met, and these things are the main indicators to prove that you are a good communicator, and there will be no language barriers between the two of you. So they feel really comfortable in dealing with someone with these credentials. So don't just try and score a 6.5 or something. Just always go for your maximum. So that's the key thing. So yeah, again, having a good GPA, if possible, get some publication done. Even if you are working in your FYP or a research project, just get something out. That's the key thing. And then also having a really good IELTS score at hand while before contacting your supervisors. So those are the 3 things I would say, which would be, I mean, they are quite self-explanatory, of course, but some people just take some things for granted. But you can't take anything for granted in this process. You need to be all ready with all these aspects, and yeah, then once you are ready, then you will feel really comfortable during the whole process. Yeah, so I hope I didn't take much time. That's yeah, that's the answer. It was 3 questions, to be honest.
Important. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Lakshita. I think that pretty much explained everything. It was very comprehensive. I'll move on to Buddhima now. Have a question for Buddhima. So in your opinion, Buddhima, do we need to do a master's degree in the area of our interest before the PhD? Is that something that is required? Would you advise? Or if not, if you think going directly from the bachelor's to the PhD is a good choice, what will add value? Because most of the people will already have, maybe they have done masters, they might have research papers. So in that case, what will add value to be competitive among the applicants who already have a master's? What's your thought?
Okay, so I think the short answer for the question on whether we need a master's degree is it depends on the research group you want to join. So basically, I mean, it depends on the universities, depends on the research. For example, in my university, if you are going for if you are applying for a PhD question in computer science or communications, they don't require masters if your bachelor's degree is 4 years. So this is one of the key things. So if you have a 3-year bachelor's degree, you might need a master's, but for a 4-year bachelor's degree, you don't need a master's. But in ETS Zurich, it's different. As Savin said, they require a master's if you want to join PhD. So basically, I mean, the short answer, I mean, the advice I can give you is always do your research and check whether they require masters, or check if this requirement can be waived somehow. For example, in EPFL, there are some PhD programs that require masters. For example, EDE, electronic and electrical engineering. Who have joined that program without a master's. So if you can prove that even if you don't have the master's, you have acquired the necessary expertise in this area, then you can get the PhD, basically get admitted to the PhD. Okay, so that's the short answer. That's the answer I can give for the first question, whether we need a master's or not. So make sure that you read the application process carefully and make sure that they ask for a master's or not. And if you don't have a master's, then I think there are a lot of programs that don't ask for masters. You can join those programs. You can apply for those programs. But having a master's can sometimes help. For example, okay, so if you have only the bachelor's degree from University of Moratuwa, you can take these specialized courses in one area, but if you're not focused, you might do these courses in 3 different areas, and that doesn't help much when you start doing the PhD. So it's better if you already have figured out your expertise, your research field, and you have focused all your coursework on this field. If you don't have the masters, then how can we be competitive among the applicants, the other applicants? So for this, I think one of the most important things is that you have a good GPA in your bachelor's. So I asked this question from the director of PhD program here. I asked him what they look at when if somebody has a master's and somebody does not have a master's. So what particularly interested the GPA during master's program, because in their opinion, most master students have good GPAs. So if they want to compare two people, they will look at their bachelor's GPA. So it's very important that you have a good GPA in your bachelor's degree, but it is not a must. Again, you can cover this requirement with something else. I will for example, if you can prove that even if you do not have good grades, you know the field, if you have some really good publications, or if you have some achievements in international competitions and so on, then this is a strong indication that you are good at what you do. So this is one thing that you can do to be competitive with those who have master. Other than that, I think it's really important that you get really good recommendation letters from your recommenders. So you can ask them, make sure that you request your recommendation letters from the people who know you well. And it's also good if the university that you are applying to knows about these people that they are recommending. Because if they have recommended some people in the past and they have performed well at their universities, then if you get a recommendation from one of these people again, and this person compares you with that person and said, okay, I know this person and this person can do really well, perform really well with the studies, and I can compare him with the other guy, and this is my comparison, then it could be really helpful for the committee to evaluate you. Really important. Then the publications, I already mentioned that it's very good if you have published in good venues, but even if you don't have publications in good venues, if you publish in some obscure conference, it's even fine. Like if they look at your paper, and if the writing is good, if the results are good, they will be happy. Yes. So then the last thing is they ask for this statement of purpose in your application. So make sure that in this statement of purpose, you market yourself well and convince the committee why they should hire you, even if you don't have a master's. Don't say that I don't have a master's, but I can cover this. But like you can use this document, market yourself direct. You can talk about the projects you can talk about them passionately, and you can link these projects to the research work that's being done at the respective universities, and say something like, I want to continue on this research. Here are my ideas on how you can continue, and so on. So this is really important, and I think it will be fine. So yeah, this is my take on this.
I think this is one of the questions that we get asked usually. Do you need a master's before applying for PhD? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do we expect? And how will the master's applications compare with the bachelor's applications? So I think you covered that pretty well. Thank you. Next up, Jatushan, I have a question for you. So you worked as a research engineer for a year before applying for the PhD. So how useful was that for your application? And would you advise someone else to do that as well before applying for a PhD? Did it help your application process?
Yeah, thanks, brother. So yeah, so I think I had a story that I applied during my final years, and like I think I applied for like 10 schools, and all of them got rejected. So there is no way I can. So I mean, if you really want to go to high studies, and if all of your application got rejected, so there is no way. You just need to find a job where you can do research and get some papers, so that in the next iteration you will get you will most probably get accepted. So that's what I did. So I think it's not necessary to do a research engineer if you already got accepted, or if you are really confident that you will get accepted. But I mean, it has its ups and downs. So first thing is that, yeah, so it's might be a bit hard to get some sort of research engineer job where you will have this full freedom to do like research, just write papers, not do any like engineering jobs. So I was fortunate to like get something like that. So I was able to get some like publication during that period. So I think that definitely helps, because in the second iteration I got the admission. So that was really helpful. Yeah, and also I had to, okay, so I also had to take my GRE. I think I had to take like 3 times. So I mean, if you really wants to do high studies, then just try until you get it. So that's the best advice I can tell, I guess. Apart from that, I think doing a research engineer is also had some other advantage, that it's also good to take some break after your undergrads, because you are going to spend like 4 years in a 4 or 5 years in your PhD for the same place. It's good to take some year break, maybe at least, and you can just travel around, and also like it financially also you can get some money during, because PhD relatively the research engineer jobs will pay much more than the PhD. So it's good to, if you want, you can use it to like enjoy you for 1 year. And I mean, doing a research engineer also will allow us to has more collaboration. So you will work with like different kind of people from different countries before you joining your PhD. So you will get you will get more exposure that what other peoples are doing and what are the areas you want to work in your PhD. So that will also kind of help me to like write my statement of purpose, and like during my interviews that I know like what are the areas at least I had some like slight idea that what are the areas I wanted to do for my PhD. So it was also kind of helpful that you get to know how what are other peoples are doing in this area. Yeah, and most importantly, I think the main goal of what you do between your PhD and the undergrad is to optimize your chances to get into the PhD program. So it does not have to be research engineer. It just has to be anything where you can do some good research and get some publications. So I think that's the main goal. It does not necessarily have to be a research engineer. You can do internship at a companies or you teaching assistant or whatever, but yeah, just doing good research during this period would be really helpful.
Much like they look at whether we have some previous experience doing research, right? If they have that, that can be a huge plus for the application, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chatushan.
Yeah.
Namita, next question is for you. So, can you? This is a question that again that most people get asked, like, why did you do a PhD? So I'll put that in a better way. So can you tell us about how you think a PhD will add value to your profile? Because when we say a PhD, we always think about academics, lecturers, professors, right? So what?
Four or 5 years ago, and I went to Dr. Ranga and asked him, should I do a PhD? And he asked me a question back. Does money motivates you? And I said, no. And he said, then you should do it. I think that's the most important question I ever asked at University of Moratuwa.
Dr. Ranga is he joined the call, Namita.
Sorry?
Dr. Ranga joined the call. He's in the audience.
Oh, okay, I can see that. Yeah. So the most important thing, so I would then say that a PhD is not only academic. So it has so essentially the PhD. So my advisor said this, that the result of a PhD is not your work. The result of a PhD is you. An undergraduate student who just graduated without any proper skills in analytics, and in the 4 or 5 year process converted into a great scholar who can understand things, who can see things deeply and find solutions. And that's the most important thing of a PhD. So in my group, I think most of the students have gone to industry and not academia. There's also some other reason that academia is very competitive, but it's like to enter academia, it's a must to have a PhD. But having a PhD does not mean you are restricted to academia. You can go to various places. Like I know some students who have done startups. I know some students who work in those big tech companies. And some students have even gone to Wall Street and be bankers, because a PhD gives you that analytic skill where you can apply it to anywhere. And also when I interned at Google, I think most of the people in my group had already had PhDs, but they're working in the industry because that's where they like. So I would say that a PhD adds a lot of value to your life, and you should be very careful in deciding whether PhD is for you, and it totally depends on the individual, but I would say it's not restricted to academia. Thank you.
Yeah. I had my connection interrupted when I was asking my question, but you pretty much answered everything that I had to ask from you. I have the next question for Savindu. Right. So Savindu, even in your introduction, one of the things that we noticed is that you have done a lot of extracurricular activities within the university while you were at Moratuwa. So did having plenty of extracurricular activities in your profile help you land grad school? Would you think like that? What's your opinion?
Yeah, thank you very much for the very interesting question. To answer this question, I will first, I have to make this distinction, because like the core of your PhD or higher studies or master's application is basically your academic achievements, your research your publications, and probably also your working experience. So this is the core of your application. Because like these professors or the research institutions or the universities are not auctioning people for their football club, or they want student representative for their students union, because they want PhD students for their research group to drive the research forward. So, but like how extracurricular activities is adding value is basically the extracurricular activities are basically the icing on the cake. It spices your application up and then gives you the competitive advantage, because all these placements are very competitive. And if you apply to higher ranked universities, it's basically for one position, you get about 150 applications for the professor. And then he needs to shortlist them. And now I will quickly explain you how this advantage of extracurricular activities is derived. First, I explained you in my answer to the previous question that you need to find your strengths and your passion first. And doing extracurricular activities helps you to understand your strengths and your interest and passion. And this mainly helps you to decide which path or the avenue you should take when you are going to do higher studies, because you are narrowing down, as I said earlier, your specialization. And if you are going to do something which you don't like for 4 years for minimum pay, believe me, you are going to suffer. So first thing you should do is you should do something you like. So extracurricular activities helps you to figure out, try different things, and then fix your strengths and weaknesses and your passion, and then you can decide on which avenues to take. So that this is the most important takeaway for me by doing extracurricular activities, because at universities and at schools you can do a lot of extracurricular activities, and then this opportunity is not there anymore when you join the industry or when you start your PhDs. So you should do these activities at your school or at your university and then try the things out. And also, if you do these extracurricular activities, you get a lot of other skills and benefits. For example, you can improve communication skills, public speaking, interpersonal skills. You can also try these activities inside the university, where even if you make mistakes, there's nobody to laugh at you, because everybody is at the same level in the university. So, but if you go to a higher forum, educated forum, and if you make these mistakes, there are people who are going to laugh at you. So these skills and abilities are being developed by doing extracurricular activities during the university career. And also, when you are managing your research project, you are basically managing a project. This is very similar to managing a project in the corporate environment. For example, every research project has multiple stakeholders. There's a professor, there are industry partners. Industry partners want something other than what the professor needs, and I want the publication. So like there are conflicting interests of these all of these stakeholders, and having some prior project management skills basically helps you a lot in managing your own research project. And also you manage your finances. The funding is limited. You need to deliver within the funding. So you learn all these things by doing extracurricular activities. Time management, for example. And after doing these activities, you can list these activities in your LinkedIn profile or your CV, and then your CV and the LinkedIn profile gets boosted from these activities. And then when the professors are shortlisting candidates, they see that this person has done some voluntary activities, some sports, and specifically they check these activities to see whether this candidate match the team culture of the country, of the university, of the research group, for example. So if you can prove that you match their culture, it's a good competitive advantage over the other candidates. And especially if you are applying engineering practices, for example, data science applications in business domains or strategy, which I am doing right now, is they basically look for people, look for candidates who can work with people, manage projects, because there are industry partners and you are working with corporate environments. So they want people who can manage these projects in the best possible way and deliver the deliverables. So this is pretty helpful if you are specifically applying your engineering knowledge to business applications, business analytics, for example. And last but not least, the most important thing is perseverance. For example, somebody who has done sports know that when doing sports, your opponent is also like planning and taking all the strategies to defeat you, and you also want to win against your opponent. So you try your best strategies and all the strategies to kind of win against your opponent, and you persevere. And that is basically the same thing which you do in your research project, because you try out many different things, different methods, different ways of analysis, just to find the answer for your research question. So this is mainly helpful in managing your research project. So at last, in conclusion, the extracurricular activities not only make your application well-rounded, but also helps you to overcome the challenges which you face in your higher studies journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that you said they're not recruiting people for the football club. I had a similar experience when I first joined my PhD. Even my advisor asked, you have done several extracurricular activities in university, so are you planning to do something here as well? So I had to, steer it in a delicate way, saying that I expect to do something, but I'll be putting most of my time for the research work. So it depends on the group, depends on the expectations, I think, depends on the field as well. Right, thank you, Samidu. So I sent a message in the chat asking people to send questions, and we already got several questions. While I go through them and make sure that it's not a duplicate question that we asked before, let me circle back to Lakshita and direct a question at him. Yeah, so right now, most of the audience members that we have, they are either thinking of going for graduate studies, or they are in the process of application, process of applying for graduate studies. So when preparing the graduate application, it can be definitely a hectic process. I don't know about you, but I spent like, I think about 3 months preparing for the exams, writing the letters. And again, that depends on the person and the amount of work that you need to do. Can be a hectic process. So do you have any tips that you can give someone who's preparing for their graduate studies?
Yeah, sure. It's a really good question. I think some parts of this question were previously answered as well, like the English exam, how to contact the supervisors, the value of your GPA and all that. I'll try and guide this question in a different direction, because if you're already someone who's having a 4-point GPA with some publications, you don't even need to listen to what we are saying, to be very honest. But if you're at that border where you're 3.7, 3.6, and you're trying to uplift your GPA with some publications, and then you're planning to do your graduate studies, I will try and address those people, because they are the ones who might benefit the most from what we are discussing from this during this session. So as I said, if you already have a first class, and maybe some publications with a good score for your English exam, IELTS, TOEFL, or GRE, or whatever, yeah, you should not find it difficult to find a good opportunity. But if your GPA is on the bit lower end, you might want to market yourself a bit differently. And then also, if you don't have a publication, by all means, get one done from your FYP or from your research project. It's definitely worthwhile doing that. And then you can work on your English separately. But so those are things that are in your control. Even if you start from the scratch today, you can get some publication done in future. and then your English is also, I mean, it can be improved. But if your GPA is at that border, then some things, there may be some things that you might want to consider. For example, some of you might consider doing a master's degree to compensate for your lower GPA and then start your PhD hunt. But my advice would be, if you're doing a PhD, sorry, if you're doing a master's with the intention of doing a PhD afterwards or applying for a competitive PhD stream, my advice would be, you should not just do a master's just for the sake of getting a master's qualification. Your master's, you should be doing your master's in flying colors so that you can outperform your competitors. My definition of a good master's degree would be, if it's evaluated, or if you're given a GPA, you should have a really good GPA. And if not, then you need to have some really good publications at top venues, top ranked conferences, or high impact factor journals. The reason I'm saying this is, I'm not sure about the other countries, but in Australia, to my understanding, they pool you, or they evaluate your academic performance based on the most recent academic qualification that you claim you have. So if you have a master's, they first pool you with the people who already have masters, and then you're ranked based on those people. So in that case, even if your undergraduate degree is a good one, and if you have done a master's, and if you don't have enough publications, then your ranking will be low. So that means you tried to compensate for your lower GPA, but it didn't work out. So if you are doing a master's, if you're planning on doing it, then my advice would be do it with your best effort, and get some good publications out. So that's something that I would recommend you consider doing. And the other thing is, well, there are other ways you can tell your story to your potential supervisor. If you are having a bit of a lower GPA, so something that you can do is, like, if you have a really good GPA during your last year or final year of study, you can maybe mention that while you are contacting your supervisor. Or else, say if you're interested in some research domain, let's say machine vision, since Dr. Ranga is here, so you can, if you have done exceedingly well in related areas, in related modules, you can mention that. Or else, if you're doing a really good research project or an FYP, you can mention that. So there are certain things that you can add to these email communications that you're doing with these potential supervisors, so that you can convince them that even though you were not so good, or you were sort of distracted during the first year or second year, once these specialized streams are coming up, you are really interested and you picked it up, you picked your work up. So those are certain ways that you can use to sort of compensate for some of your weaknesses. So and also the main thing is, as Savindu said earlier, you need to understand your weaknesses and strengths, and you need to market your strengths and also work to improve from your weaknesses, so that I mean, and you can be perseverant as well, meaning, as Jatusan said very precisely, if you don't get an opportunity in this intake, that doesn't mean that you are never going to get one. You can improve some things and then do the thing again and apply, so that one day, if you are really determined, then you will definitely gonna get some opportunity. And the other thing I would like to emphasize is, like, you might be dreaming about going to a really good university, preferably within the, let's say, top 100 of the world. But there are some other supervisors and really good research groups that are outside this top 100 or something, but they may be willing to take you in. So being flexible in these applications and in your aims is also really important, because a PhD is not evaluated just by the institution that you take it from. It's dependent on the way you publish and the way you perform. So that's something that I would like to give as a key message. And finally, yeah, so the other thing is like, all in all, there is no one secret recipe for success. You will need to figure out your own secret recipe because everyone's situation is different. So however, like, I mean, with the things that we learn from ENTC, with the exposure and the balanced education that we get from ENTC, I mean, even if your GPA is a bit lower and if you have to strive a bit to get to your PhD, it's really enough. I mean, the basic understanding and the basic background that we get would be more than enough for us as a baseline, so that we can work on and perform at the highest level in any top level graduate school in the world. So if you are really determined to get an opportunity, you should definitely, you will find a way. Because as I said, there's no secret recipe, and you need to work out yourself what's best for you. So yeah, I thought that would be my general answer for those people who are considering, but maybe thinking whether they are good enough. You are definitely good enough. Don't doubt yourself. So yeah, that's, I don't know. I really don't know whether I answered the question you asked, but that's something that I wanted to add. Yeah.
You did. I think the key takeaway is that people should know how to market themselves. What are the strengths? Highlight them.
Absolutely.
And also, one thing that I found to be helpful when I was applying for PhD was to talk to people who have gotten acceptance into these top schools, and then kind of discuss with them how they approached this process of applying for grad studies. Have a look at their statements of purpose, how they have written them. Of course, you cannot, take an SOP and copy that. It's not going to work. It has to be your own story, but you can definitely get some guidance from what people have done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking to people really helps.
Yeah. So we would recommend you to reach out to maybe it can be your seniors, can be friends, or even family members. Reach out to them, get some one-on-one guidance where possible.
And I think the good thing being someone from ENTC is we have people all over the world at top venues. So there are people who have done this before, so you can get very good guidance from them.
Right. Thank you, Rakshita. I have a question that Buddhim and I have been talking about for a while. Up next, to direct towards him. So why would someone choose to do graduate studies in Europe compared to some other country, say USA? So how would you compare research opportunities, industry in general? Because that's when we're applying, we don't know where to apply. There's USA, there's Europe, there's Australia, there are other parts of the world, like NUS is a top school in Asia. So how would you pick and choose?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is the quality of the graduate program. So basically, it depends on the field, right? So for the different universities are famous for different fields. They have different expertise. So the main criteria when you choose graduate school should be what is your passion and who are the people who are the experts on this field and where are they? Not like Lakshita said, like maybe the top most experts on this field might not be from a well-known university. So this could well be the case. So I think this should be the number one criteria when you are choosing where to go. But I mean, generally, I can compare like US and European universities on a more general level. If you are looking for just a master's degree, then there are many European master's programs with no tuition fees at all. They're absolutely free, and you can usually find good research scholarships or part-time work in technical companies, startups to cover your cost of living. So this is one thing to keep in mind if you're applying for the master's. But for the PhDs, what I said earlier applies. You have to look for where the top experts in the field works, and if they're working in Europe or if they're working in US, then like apply there. That's the general advice that I can give you. If you compare like the funding opportunities, I think most European universities, like leading European universities, have good funding. They get grants from European Research Council, and in Switzerland they get grants from Swiss Science Foundation. And usually the professors are less stressed here about applying for grants because they usually have enough funding, more than enough funding. So funding wise, maybe there are better opportunities in Europe. Then regarding the exposure you get, I think both US and Europe are equivalent in this case, because I mean, if you want to attend any major conference, you always get travel and financial support to do that. And many leading tech companies like including Google, Facebook, IBM, Microsoft, and if you are looking at EDA, then Synopsys and Mentor Graphics, these companies have their research branches in Europe as well, and they are maintaining very close connections with the leading universities here. So this is so in this regard, I think exposure, both US and if you go to a US university or European university, you get good exposure, and I think this is the case like in many other parts of the world as well. Nowadays, most companies are like these big tech companies. They have branches all over the place, so it's not a big issue exposure-wise. And in Europe, almost all professors have some research experience in US, at least for a couple of years, or either they have done their PhDs in the US. So and most European universities are following the US model of graduate studies. So in this regard, I think the experiences and expertise of the supervisors are more or less equal. Yeah, so this is mainly what I want to highlight. What's more appealing in Europe than in US is, I guess, would be the living conditions. You get great salaries and great benefits in European universities, and like for example, unlike in US, Europe has really good public transport. You can travel like for a whole country for the weekend if you want, and you get enough salary to spend on train tickets and flights. Yeah, so this is my take.
Yes, Europe is a good place to travel.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that insight. I have a kind of a rapid fire type of question that we got from the audience. Let me quickly go to that. So this is not directed at any particular person. It's for everyone. Just take a few seconds and try to answer this. The question is, when did you guys start applying for graduate studies compared to your bachelor's and compared to when you started your university? When did you start applying? Can you give us a rough timeline? Do you remember?
Yeah, for me, I think we graduated in March 2015, if I remember correctly, and then we were targeting the application deadlines in September, November, December that year, I guess. So we were, yeah. So I started applying maybe in August or a bit before that.
And the intake was next year. For that
intake was next year, yes.
Okay.
Yes, the situation is kind of unfortunate in Sri Lanka because we usually don't know when we are going to graduate. The timelines change. So it's better you could apply while you are still doing your bachelor's and immediately start your PhD or master's after you finish. But for this, you need like a little bit more support from the university to get maybe tentative transcripts and so on.
Amita, how about you? Am I audible, Namita? What was
Yes.
the timeline that you worked with?
Yes, so I graduated same as Buddhima until 2015, but I didn't apply in the immediate year. I waited 1 year because I wanted to continue my final year project with a startup. And then only after I satisfied with that, I applied. So I started applying in next year, August. So that's around 1 year and 4 months. So I started my graduate school more than 2 years after my graduation.
How about you, Lakshita?
Yeah, same thing, similar to Namita said. So I actually graduated in 2013, and I started my PhD study in early 2016. So it's around 3 years. And so if you ask me what I did during those 3 years, I worked as a lecturer and a teaching assistant at ENTC. And I started applying around talking to supervisors basically around mid 2015. And yeah, the deadlines were around October 2015. And then we got the results after about 2 months, at the start of 2016 or end of 2015. And then the intake, I came here around February 2016. So yeah, before. So if you ask me how long did it take for me to start applying and get the PhD and then come here, it was around maybe 6 months to do the whole thing. Yeah.
How about you?
Subodh, I think you were mute when you were naming the person.
Am I audible now? Jatushan, what is your
yeah.
experience?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't hear. Yeah. So I think I started applying my first round of application in 2018 December. Like usually the US university have this all the deadline in the December timeline. So I first applied on 2018 December when I was in my final year, like almost like ending my final year. And then I did applied for the second time in 2019 December. Then I started my PhD in 2020 that's almost like 2020 August. So maybe 1.5 years or 2 years from graduating.
How much time do you think it will take to prepare? Writing the SOP, preparing for exams.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that starting the SOP as early as possible. Even like taking 6 months to write a SOP is not a bad idea, because you need to reiterate like very carefully and send it to many people as possible and get their opinion and just refine it and fine tune it as much as possible. So maybe a good thing would be just start as soon as possible. Like maybe if you're applying for in December, start in June or July, and also start doing this exam, because sometime you might want to do the exams again. So start this exam so early as possible, because I had to do this exam like 2 or 3 days before my deadline. So it was really stressful. So don't do that. So maybe 6 months is a good starting point.
Okay. SOP and the recommendation letters and all those can be an iterative process, right? It's not like you're going to sit down one day and then complete writing your SOP. So you can keep it as a work in progress, get some opinions from other people. And yeah. Savindu, how about your case?
Yeah, I searched for the application deadlines of ETH Zurich and then EPFL. Both are basically around December, January usually. And I went through the master's process because ETH Zurich requires to have a master for the PhD program. So there's basically no other way at ETH Zurich. You should apply for the master, and if you get admitted to the master, mainly the PhD offer is kind of guaranteed. If you terribly underperform in the master, then it's not guaranteed, but generally it's guaranteed. Therefore, I matched the application deadline by December 15th, like mid-December, for the master's program starting in 2019 September. Because most of the non-EU applications are being processed in the December deadline. Europeans can apply in the April deadline as well for the September intake, but non-EU applicants should apply in the December because the visa process is kind of lengthy, and that's the usual process. At ETH Zurich and at the EPFL2, it was the same.
I think that gave a rough idea about the timelines, I believe. I have a question, an audience question to Jatushan. I think Dr. Ang is also here. He will also be able to chip in for this. What are the trending areas these days in computer vision that we can have a prior look, which can land as a good PhD position? I'll repeat. What are the trending areas these days in computer vision that we can have a prior look, which can land as a good PhD position?
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, so yeah, it's tricky, I guess. Yeah, so I think right now there are a couple of things like almost everyone is working, like transformers is like it's like a very hot thing, like everyone just write one paper in transformers all these days. So I mean, for the people who don't know, so like CNNs are like kind of these backbones for almost all the computer vision these days. So transformers are slightly overtaking these CNNs, but there, I mean, yeah, there is some issues, of course. So transformers, like everyone is doing, but the problem is that you, like as a single person, you cannot train these transformers. They are like very computationally expensive and so on. So they are mostly done in an industry setting. So it's really hard to work on those problems. But of course, there are some clever ways you can do to make it efficient on your like a local machine or something. So transformers is maybe a good thing to look at. And yeah, so maybe this might be biased, but because I'm just saying because I'm working on this, but like 3D vision is kind of also like kind of an interesting topic and hot topic, because there is this very like famous publications called NERF, neural radiance field. So they also like, there are tons of papers coming like almost every day on this like 3D geometry and 3D reconstruction. And yeah, so because I mean 3D is really important, at least because the world is 3D. So getting this extra information, extra dimensional information from these 2D images, at least in the computer vision, would be really interesting. So I think people are working on these areas. Yes, apart from that, of course, there is this like kind of this interesting direction going on, this self-supervised and unsupervised learning, because this world is like tons of data are creating these days. So one of the good way to learn them is without labels, because there is not enough compute or resource you have to label this data. So people are getting more interest toward this unsupervised or self-supervised learning. I think, and if Dr. Ranga has anything else to add in. I think that's all I have, I guess. But of course, like, because these computer vision people are almost like advertising themselves on Twitter. So if you just go to Twitter, you can definitely find like lots of new papers coming every day, and like almost all these computer vision papers are uploaded to archive every day. So there is no problem of like finding these papers. So if you just spend like 5 days in archive, you can definitely find an interesting and trending topic by yourself. Yes.
I have an audience question for Namita. Namita, can you please compare two scenarios? So scenario number one is join the industry after masters. And then the scenario number two is directly do a PhD and then join the industry. It's a very subjective question. What's your take on that?
That's actually a wonderful question. That's a question I have given a lot of thought, and I have thought of a couple of years, and it's a question a lot of time asked from me. So my opinion is that when you do an MSc and join the industry, you would be basically joining as a software engineer or a hardware engineer. And your life would be more like you're an engineer. You are a better engineer because you now have more experience. But you'll be in a project, you'll be given that get these things done, and then you progress to the career and become a manager or a lead engineer, and then you get more control on what you are doing. And there's not much difference joining as engineer after masters or after bachelor's, except that after masters, you have a better opportunity to get. But joining the industry after PhD is a complete different thing. Most of the time, you would be joining as a research engineer, where you'd be doing cutting edge research in, let's say, Google AI or Microsoft Research. And so the drive would not be coming from other side, the drive would be coming mostly from your side. There may be some industry requirements, like let's say Facebook is want to make something in 10 years. So you'd be working on some very exciting project that may be not available to public even. And also maybe if in the PhD you do a really good project and a company would say, oh, we might need this in a few years. Can you come to and work for us and implement this for our system? So, and at that time, like you are getting, so your project is something you really like doing. That's why you do it. And then you are getting paid to do that. And so in that case, you'd get paid a lot more as a research engineer than a software engineer. But at the same time, I would like to say the other side. There's an opportunity cost in doing a PhD and joining an industry, because the stipend a PhD student gets is less than 1/4 of what you get paid in the industry. So if you calculate what you'd be earning in the time in the masters, you would realize that you would be missing up to around $250,000 in potential income. So there it's two sides, and you should again think about what you like most, whether you want to do a PhD and do a good research and be a good scholar and then go to the industry, or you just want to go industry and you want masters as a stepping stone. That's the question you have to answer yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Namita. I think that's a very good take on that, because there's no one size fits all kind of answer you can give for that. Depends on your career goals and everything. Circling back to Savindu. Savindu, so this is again another question that most people think about, and even I thought about when before going for my PhD. What is the work-life balance? How does it look like? Is it like entirely work? You work for like 16 hours a day, and then you spend 2 hours for meals and 6 hours for sleep? How does that look like?
Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting question. I will start by first explaining what a day in graduate studies life look like. And then the audience can basically visualize how you will be spending your life as a graduate student. And then I will move on to the work-life balance and how to create the perfect balance which suits your lifestyle, basically. So first, the day of graduate student would look like you usually start work in the morning, basically the same thing which every professional do. Start by first checking your emails and your to-do list for the day mainly, and then you will be mostly working individually on your project because the PhD or the studies are basically individual, and it's an individual deliverable. So you will be working on your project mainly, and then in the meantime you will have your coffee breaks with your colleagues, snacks and stuff, and then you will also have some teaching responsibilities because you should act as a teaching assistant for your professor or the senior researchers. So you get some activities or the responsibilities to develop content of these lectures, mark assignments, communication with the students, and arranging exams and all this administrative stuff in addition to your research responsibility. And then probably people will go for lunch with the teammates, colleagues, or your office roommate. And then you will also have some meetings with the senior researchers, industry partners, And also in your PhD, you will be supervising some of your master students or the bachelor students in their master or bachelor thesis. So you will also have some meetings with these students. And in the evening, basically, the work should stop, but the work can carry out. Mainly, how to like establish the perfect work-life balance is basically you should not carry your work home, as well as you should not carry your home to work. And if you mix these two up, then you will really struggle in having this work-life balance. And also what you need to do is you should not relax while you work, and while you relax you should not work. So mainly what I want to highlight is when you are at work, you should work efficiently, effectively, and smart. And this will save you a lot of time. I know, like, you should know that all the PhD or the research work will be individual, and you should commit, and it is difficult. You should persevere, and it's filled of a lot of hard work, long hours for relatively low pay. But if you work efficiently and effectively, you can find time to enjoy life. And specifically, these PhD programs have these events to help you to achieve this work-life balance. For example, at ETH Zurich, they have the doctoral retreat for all the PhD students. They basically fund everything. You just need to be there. And it's a 3-day program in the Swiss Alps usually. And then they have all these recreational activities plus some guidance to your research as well. And then you are funded to take part in conferences, travel for these conferences and experience different cultures and cities as well. And also they will have team trips. Your research group will arrange trips and hikes. For example, this is the usual practice in Switzerland, I guess, as also in EPFL. And in the meantime, you should also take the initiative to mingle with people. You should open up yourself, communicate with your colleagues, your senior researchers, professors, and also make friends. Because even though the research work is individual, always try to connect with people, because the worst thing which can happen in the PhD life is basically you feel lonely and you get stranded, you get lost in your work. So don't let this happen. The best thing you can do is to avoid this is connecting with people, having a lot of friends, and then it will help you to achieve the perfect work-life balance. And also what you can do is from now onwards, you can follow the students, the seniors, or the people who have finished their higher studies on social media, and then look what they are doing. And you will see that like they do a lot of other things apart from their PhD or the studies. And basically, one should note that the academics are not geeks. They do sports, they travel, they have families, they have friends, and they do startups sometimes. They make photos, they make videos, and so on. So you will have enough time to enjoy life if you work smart. That's the takeaway message.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said if you work smart, you'll have the time to have the work-life balance as well. Okay, so there's a question, an audience question. I think this goes to Namita. Namita, to go, one second. So let me rephrase this. Okay, yeah. So to go into graduate studies, is it needed to do your internship in a research area in a foreign university? So is a foreign internship mandatory if you want to go for graduate studies?
No, I would categorically emphatically say it's no. So if you take my area, I currently work in quantum error correction. I don't think you can, it's easy to find internship in that area in Sri Lanka or anywhere else. So what matters is you have to show that you are curious, you have the correct attitude, you are a hard worker, you the potential advising committee should see your potential, and that is what matters. And if you can show that in your, like, I have worked in many projects where I have never done I have never done an internship in any foreign university before I come to grad school. And I know a lot of people who has not done any kind of internship, but that doesn't matter, because what they look is, can this person do research? Can this person be made to a good scholar? If that's the case, you are good.
Thank you, Ramita. Yes, I agree with that completely. So it depends on the exposure that you get and the work you have done in the past. So it doesn't matter where you do them. I think the foreign university story comes in because we have the general mindset that foreign universities have more exposure. But I think if that can be a plus, of course, but it's not a requirement, definitely.
Agree.
Right. Then another audience question. I think some people asked, what are the conferences most recognized by professors in different areas? So it's difficult to give like a laundry list of conferences right now. I think if I ask each panelist, they will tell some abbreviations of conferences that they are familiar with. But the best option is for you to go to Google, search for it with to Google Scholar, and then look at what are the top conferences are, their impact factors, and how high they are rated in those respective areas. Because one conference can be ranked very high in one area, but the same conference might be lower down in another area. So it's a matter of you doing your due diligence and searching for them. Right. So we are actually at the top of the hour. We said we'll take about 2 hours, and we are close to our finishing time. So let me throw a common question to everyone, and we will wrap the session up. Right. And that question is, so this is again based on your experience. Some of you mentioned that when you were planning to apply for graduate studies, you either worked with some professors in the past, or else you reached out to them via email. Then what did you do, and how did you meet those people? What is each one of your subjective case? Like, how did you reach out? Did you know anyone before you apply? Or if you did reach out to them, what was the method? Let's start with Lakshita.
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. Can you
Sure,
ask that again?
I'll repeat. Yes. So one of the things I think that got highlighted was that it's good to have some sort of a connection with a faculty member when you're applying for PhDs. Did you do that? Did you get connected, or else you went to the university and you met that person? And I can answer the same question in a different way. When you were doing bachelor's, did you have any research collaborations ongoing? And did you kind of extend that to your PhD? How did it work for you?
Yeah, so since I ended up in an Australian university, the Australian model is basically you first need to somehow get in touch with a professor and then get him to support your application and then start the official application process, right? So you're not blindly going and then finding a supervisor. So I had no option but to reach out and get their support, which is what I did. So if you are coming to Australia, you have no option but to do that. And yeah, but I had no collaboration or anything going on with this particular supervisor that I did my PhD with. It was basically through writing to them and then yeah, get them to reply and then started a conversation and then discussed with them about the potential areas or research gaps that we could work on, and then coming to a mutual agreement, and then also convincing him that I can do research. As all of these prominent panelists said, we need to prove them that we can do research, which is what I tried to do, and of course succeeded. And then yeah, so had no prior connections with the supervisor. I just reached out to them, and then fortunately they responded. Yeah.
Buddhima, what was your story?
For me, I think I didn't write to any professor here at EPFL, but I contacted one professor in NUS before applying there. So he invited me for an internship there for a short time, like 1.5, 6 weeks. Yeah. But I mean, it was like, I think it was helpful for getting an offer from NUS, but I ultimately didn't go there.
Okay. Dr. Sam, how about you, especially when you worked as a research engineer? How did you make those connections?
Yeah, so I think during my undergrad, I think we had some collaboration with like the people from Australian University. But for the PhD, I decided to apply for US University. So I didn't really extend it to that direction. But I did write some emails for US universities, but most of them didn't reply. But some of them replied saying that there is no chance. So about maybe 20 people I wrote, maybe two or three people replied. So there is a very less probability you will get a reply. Getting the opportunity for the research engineer was really helpful, because I started doing some research during my undergrad with Dr. Ranga and Dr. Samira Ranasinghe. So he was a student of the person I worked in Abu Dhabi. So that was a great connection. So I mean, getting started doing research as soon as possible during your undergrad will open up lots of connections. So that's definitely a recommend.
Thank you, Jyotisha. Namita, how was your story?
I contacted a couple of professors, but I did not got a response from them. So for all the universities I got admitted, I had not made a connection before getting admitted. And even at Rice, I met the professors after I came to Rice. So in US, it's not mandatory to make a connection. It certainly helps. It's just that you have to convince at least one person in the graduate committee to accept you.
Right. Samidu, how about you?
Yeah, in my case, I went through the master's process, and I also would like to highlight the importance of doing this master, because it gives you the opportunity to try out some different avenues and then choose the best one which matches with your strengths and weaknesses. So I went through the master's process, and at ETH Zurich, in my department, I had about 19 professors doing research in 19 different areas. And then in my master's program, I took courses of these professors, and then ultimately I decided the area which I like the most. So this was the connection I made, and I made the connection by doing the course of the professor, and then also doing the thesis in that specific research area. And then the PhD position was kind of like I had an upper hand, because I already knew the professor, and also I had done the thesis with them. So there was some connection which was made specifically through the master's program.
Thank you, Samidu. Yeah, makes sense. Different people make different connections in different ways, and those connections definitely helps, but it's not mandatory when you are applying for a PhD. So if you already have a good connection, I would suggest you nurture that. Have it in a good situation, because if you're working during your bachelor's with faculty members, whether it's in Sri Lanka or outside of the country, you have to do your due diligence, and then if you committed to something, make sure you complete that beyond the good books. It's not by praising or saying praises about the person, simply by doing good work. So have those good connections and maintain them, and that can definitely help you. It can even be a help as a recommendation. Right? When you're writing a recommendation, that person can help you in that aspect as well. So thank you guys for your inputs. I'd like to invite Dr. Ranga to direct some questions or make some remarks. So I hope you can hear
thank
us.
you, Dr. Subodh. Thank you very much for conducting this. I'll combine my question and the thanks. So thank you very much, Namita, Lakshita, Jatushan, Buddhim, and Samidu. It's extremely nice to see you through this medium. Thank you very much. My question for you is, now, okay, assume that you get great publications in your PhD work. You conquer all the top conferences, all the top journals. Then what is next? What is next? Don't tell me that you would become research in a great company or become a professor. That's not what I'm asking. What must be next in research wise?
there is no particular order, you can go when you're ready.
That's a very interesting question. That's a question we always think, like, what should be next? So my intention of the PhD is to become a great scholar. So throughout my research motivation has always been to look opportunities in various areas and see where I can apply what I already know and develop. So that's how I ended up with quantum error correction. I know nothing about quantum, but I know that they want a low latency control system, and I work with FPGAs, so I can apply it there. So that is my motivation. I'm not particularly interested in joining a big company, a startup, a faculty. That's not my motivation. My motivation is any place which gives me a good opportunity to apply something I know and do it and help some people. So that's what next for me.
Thank you, Namita.
I think it's a really interesting question that I still think about. So my take is also a bit similar to what Namita said. It's not just the PhD, but it's the training and it's the person you become is what's most important. And then the application of your work can be anywhere. It can be in the academia, it can be in the industry, as long as you're happy with what you're doing. I think that's what's important, and as long as you feel that you're making some impact at the place that you're working, and also if it shouldn't just be a financial thing. You should enjoy your work, and then if you feel like you can commit back to your roots, and if you can make some impact, I think that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, we all are looking for some happiness. That's the most important thing, and if you are happy with what you're doing, then that's the place you have to be, and then you need to keep on delivering and giving some good contributions to all the stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you, Lakshita.
Okay, I will go next. So I think I kind of see this as like a not a continuous thing, that you should have like a good research agenda that actually benefits the community, not just to like benefit ourselves, because like at least saying in the computer vision community, we should focus our research on like how to move the community forward, not just like stuck in a point or like backwards. So, and also one good thing I heard was that you should be working on a problem which would be trending or hot topic in maybe 5 years. So you should be start working on that right now, and it will be get trend, or it will become famous in 5 years. So no one will be working on right now. You will have lots of relaxed time, so you can be working on. And so that's also a good thing. I think the most important thing is to have a good research agenda, which would like step by step move the community forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Yatushan. Always good to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'll go next. I think I'll have to agree with what others said. Like, so I did my PhD theory because I liked my passion is in algorithms and mathematics. So I will keep doing that. Definitely, like even after my PhD, I will keep improving my skills and expertise in that area. And,
thank you,
I was passionate from the younger days about like driving organizations and leading organizations. So that also gave me kind of the need to apply the engineering mindset or the analytical mindset to business organizations, business problems. And I see a lot of people who are driving organizations are coming from this typical business administration, commerce background, and how engineers look at corporate problems, and how these like people who are qualified in business administration and commerce are looking at business problems are completely different. And now all the leading corporates are being driven by basically engineers. So my long-term vision is to use my PhD to enter a good corporate good company and then climb up my career ladder and then ultimately lead a corporate company to drive some impactful change, maybe to Sri Lanka or maybe to international countries. I don't care. Ultimately, it happens somewhere in this world. So everybody is benefited.
Yeah, thank you, Samindu. So this is from my own insights. So thank you everyone for all the insights. I'm very thankful. Thank you, Dr. Subodh, and I'm very excited to see a lot of students attending. Thank you very much also. Yes, I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Ranga. It was great to have you with us for the session. So I think that's a wrap. We got many questions through the chat, some of which I tried to combine and ask in one question, some of which are very specific. So I intentionally skipped them. I hope you can reach out to the panelists if you know them, or else get them resolved through your connections, or even Google will help. So keep searching, keep learning more. And the more information you gather, that will help you in the process of applying and securing a good graduate study placement. So to wrap up, when I initially reached out to the panelists, I told them that the session is going to be 1 to 2 hours, and we exceeded 2 hours. Thank you for your patience. It was great to have you from all over the world. So Namita, Lakshita, Chatushan, Buddhima, and Samidu. It was a pleasure and most definitely an honor to host you in this panel. Despite your busy schedules, you spend more than 2 hours with us. So thank you again for that. And also for Dr. Ranga for participating in the session and interacting with us with the questions and some remarks about the panelists as well. The audience, we had more than 100 people taking part. So I hope it was great to have you. I hope you got something valuable out of this. You can keep searching, like we mentioned, and we hope to have people from the audience in one of the future sessions of preparing for graduate studies. So that's a wrap for today, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure having you. We'll see you next time. Have a pleasant evening and take care.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Just wanted to be here. Thanks.